What's up, amigos? Coming out Jaime here today. Today, I'm going to go over a Nightrose V Premium deck profile. I'm going to go over the winning image, some of the card choices, some suggestions, and also go over some key plays as well. So let's get right into it. I'm also a METAFY coach that has helped numerous players get their results in tops. I actually help with the standard, V Premium, and Premium formats, and I help you prepare for tournament preparation as well, so that way you get your results that you're looking for and helping out with your goal. I just want to help the community grow, and feel free to book a session with me. And also to help you out more, I also just came out with the book How to Win Cardfight Tournaments, Break Through Your Mental Barrier, and Topping Trading Card Game Tournaments. And so it's available for Kindle, paperback, and also the audiobook will be coming out soon. And it's the #1 new release as well. So I'm excited for you guys to see the content and value from it too and your results. Now with the Nightrose deck, one of the best things that this deck has as a win con is really the 4 Skull Dragon attack turn. So with Nightrose, we're able to do 4 attacks, but thanks to cards like Columbard and Beatrice, we're able to get to the 5th attack. And so if we can set up our board with 2 Skull Dragons in the main phase, attack with them, then Nightrose will bring them back with a helper like Columbard or Beatrice. We can get 2 more Skull Dragon attacks, including our Vanguard at that point. So 5 solid attacks that we can really take advantage. And with Nightrose's ability, we can give our Regards even more power, giving Skull Dragon more powerful. And Skull Dragon obviously gets 2k for every card in the drop zone. So it's going to keep getting bigger and bigger in scale. And so that's really what I wanted to focus on the winning image for this deck, is to help speed that up, make Skull Dragons really big as fast as possible, and had some cards to help with more aggression, including even higher crit count. And then lastly, some cards to help deal with resource management, such as like Counterblast. And then of course we can take advantage of Protect 1, so we can have some type of shield value if we need it. And then I thought of Protect 2, but because our Regards are killed off by Nightrose's skill, we really can't take advantage of the defensive shield. And then the 5k kind of becomes negligible when the Skull Dragons become super big, because at that point your opponents either take the damage or they PG it. So onto the grade 3s. We are playing 4 copies of Nightrose. We want to make sure this is our Vanguard. We will be milling cards, so it's important that we can even see it in the drop zone. We have cards like Greed Shade that can grab it before our grade 3 turn, so we have right consistency boost in that sense too. And Nightrose has 2 phenomenal skills. The first skill is that when your Regard attacks or boosts, it gets an additional 5k until the end of that battle, and then you must retire it after that. So that's what I meant, where like our Regards are pretty much gone due to Nightrose's skill, but they get power in return, and I think it's super helpful. And it makes the aggression much more threatening. Plus, you're gonna want to revive your pieces during the battle phase or even like the next following turn. So it's perfect synergy when it comes to granblue. And the second skill is that when it attacks, you can Counterblast 1, revive an entire column, and then if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this Vanguard gets an additional 10k to the end of battle. So that way your Vanguard is swinging a little bit bigger once your opponent's at grade 3. But phenomenally, we're able to revive cards during the battle phase. So that's how we can get to the 4th attack. And again, like I mentioned with support cards, we can get to the 5th attack, which is vital at that point too. So definitely super helpful. And we're also playing 3 copies of Skull Dragon. So Skull Dragon is our beater that we're going to rely on. Again, 2k for every card in the drop zone. This is Vanguard and Regard Circle too. Ideally, you want Nightrose as Vanguard, but it can come up. So don't forget about that. But ultimately, we want this to be on Regard Circle. Keep in mind that it does have a restrictive skill in the hand that it cannot be normal called. So you do have to revive it somehow or superior call it from deck or something. But in V Premium, we generally revive from the drop zone. And so that's how you can get Skull Dragon onto the board in the first place. And then at the end of the battle, it retires itself by itself. But you can use Nightrose's skill to still get the power and retire it anyway. So it doesn't even matter at that point. And with another grade 3 that we utilize is 2 copies of Beatrice. So Beatrice, really we use it as an extender. So when it's on place, you can Soul Blast 1 and call a card not itself essentially from drop to Regard Circle. So that's how you can call another Skull Dragon during that battle phase call. You can also use this in the main phase to help build up that board in the first place. This is another card that you can use to revive a Skull Dragon during main phase setup. So sometimes, depending on the resources and the setup that you have, you may have to set up in the main phase and then in the battle phase later on. So depending on the soul and the Counterblast that you have, you can switch between Beatrice and Columbard. And the Vanguard skills don't really come up as much in this deck, so I wouldn't worry about it. It's really the superior call on Regard Circle that helps a ton. And we're going into the grade 3 heals. So here's what's cool about Nightrose too, is that the play that we generally use can be used with 1 to 2 CB. So if you have Beatrice, you just need 1 CB for Nightrose's skill. But if you have Columbard, then you need the 2 CB for the second one being Columbard, of course. So with the grade 3 heals, we can stay at low damage, especially if we're going second, so we're not falling behind certain decks that are also aggressive. So this is great against like Bermuda Triangle, Steam Maidens, and so many more decks like that too. So being able to survive is super helpful. And also what's really cool synergy is that with Greed Shade in the early game, we can still recover some of these if we do mill them. And so grade 3 heals are phenomenal shield values when we're still grade 2 or less. So Greed Shade can be utilized on your turn 2 essentially. Onto the grade 2s, we're playing 4 copies of Columbard. So Columbard is vital, so that's why we want to maximize the copies. We need to see one ASAP, if not Beatrice. So just having more copies just to be able to see them much more quicker is why I play 4. I've seen some decks even reduce it to maybe 3. That's more of like a pace deck type of build in the sense. But again, we want to be very mill heavy, very speed up, very aggressive. So maximize the copies on Columbard, because Columbard is a way to build our board with Skull Dragons even during our main phase too. And then we can use the Beatrice during the battle phase, because Columbard does have a once per turn, a hard once per turn to be able to superior call something. And it fetches us something from deck and shuffles the deck too. So you can get like Negro Bones, Skull Dragons, Beatrices, Ghost Ship, cards that you really need to be able to like maximize and capitalize too. And furthermore, we're playing 4 copies of Greed Shade. And so Greed Shade is phenomenal. Just like I said, when it's placed, you can discard 1 card from hand, mill 2 cards, and then grab a card that isn't Greed Shade. And so you can grab grade 3 heals for defensive purposes. Once you're past turn 3 and above, you can start grabbing 30k Sentinel crits, which we do play. Really take advantage of that. You could also grab a PG draw just in case you need like that higher shield type of Sentinel. Its second skill, it also gets plus 5k when you have 10 or more cards. That 10 is a magic number in this deck too. And thanks to Nightrose's skill, this becomes a 19k hitter by itself. So you can have 10k shield demanding when you go against a grade 2 that's 9k. This hits over 10k grade 2s as well pretty easily. And also 12k, 13k Vanguards. And if you boost by an 8k, 8 plus 9 is 17, plus 10k will make it 27k. So it actually makes some decent numbers, especially you're going against anything that's 12k or less to make that shield value count more. And Greed Shade is another way to help us mill faster too. So that's why I even want to play 4. It also helps fix our hands too. Like I said, you can grab a grade 3 Nightrose in case you don't have it. You can discard cards like Skull Dragon, Ghost Ship that really don't help contribute onto the hand. And speaking of Ghost Ship, we have 1 copy still. Again, it has the same restriction as Skull Dragon, where it cannot be normal called from hand, so you have to superior call it from drop. And then the second skill is that when it attacks, it gets plus 15k until the end of the battle, and then you can draw a card and retire it. And so this becomes 24. Then when Nightrose is 29, good beater with some draw power. This is really appreciative. So if you're doing a turn that with whether it be your grade 2 turn or even Nightrose turn, and you don't have like the Skull Dragons, you can still fall back on Ghost Ship being a reliable beater, but also get some advantage back to set up and dig deeper a little bit to your deck too as well. So you can abuse Ghost Ship multiple times in a turn with Nightrose. So main phase, set it up, attack, retires, draw a card, and then during the battle phase, call it back and then draw another card with another beater. So you can get some value from that as well. And then the last grade 2s that we do play is 2 copies of Ruined Shade. So we haven't seen this in a while, and I know some players may have used this card to help milling, or some decks don't use this at all and they rely on the grade 1 specifically too. I think Ruined Shade still has value. One of the things, even like past year, Bermuda, Steam Maidens being relevant in the deck, you have 10k grade 2s and you have 13k Vanguards. So cards like Greed Shade, if they don't get to the 10 count, it's still a 9k. Your Columbard is a 9k as well. So your grade 2 turn, you may not be able to deal damage unless you call a booster, which is not ideal sometimes. And so even if you get damage denied, for some reason, if a deck denies you of a Columbard, for example, on your turn 2, you can ride Ruined Shade too. It works on Vanguard or Vanguard Circle. When it attacks, you can mill 2 cards and it gets plus 4k until the end of the battle. So essentially it becomes a 13k hitter. If you boost with an 8k, it becomes 21, so it hits over a trigger against a 10k grade 2, so that's super helpful. But it also helps accelerate our milling while also being able to do some damage, because by the time we get to our turn 3, we want our opponent to have some damage, at least 2 to 3. Ideally, we would have them more if you rip a crit, but this is another card that helps in that regard too. And if it still lives, or you can revive it and you need to mill more, it's another card that you can use to keep keep milling until you have a desired drop zone that you want in quality and quantity as well. Onto the grade 1s, we are playing 3 copies of Skeleton C Navigator. So this card you may have seen is essentially you can rest 2 of your rear guards and mill the top 5 cards of your deck. Note this is not once per turn, and note you can rest any 2 rear guards, including itself or 2 other ones if you want to. So you could technically activate this twice in a turn if you have enough rear guards to work with. Most of the time, you're going to do this on a turn-by-turn basis. So like if you open up with it on turn 1, and then turn 2, you do it again, and then turn 3, you do it again, so you can get to like 15 cards and drop pretty easily. More than likely, you're going to have at least 10 cards in most of your games. And you want to at least get that to your turn 3 and then above, because your Skull Dragons will become big enough to really start like considering as multi-attacks. So that way your opponent, if they're not ready for it, they can lose a lot of cards in hand or take a lot of damage and can help you pretty much win that game with tempo at that point too. We don't play the grade 1 C Sterling Banshee, and I'll talk about more in the suggestions part of the video. But essentially we rely on the 2 Ruin Shade, 4 Greed Shade, and 3 Skeleton C Navigator to help mill the desired cards in our drop zone. And we are also playing 4 Negrabone. So when it comes to the mill type of deck, this is what I really appreciate about granblue, is that they have a card like Negrabone. So it has a drop skill. You can discard a card, bottom deck this card, and then call grade 1 from your drop to your rear guard circle. And if you have 10 or more cards in the drop zone, you can call any type of grade instead. So you can call grade 1s, grade 2s, grade 3s, etc. at the point once you reach 10 or more in the drop zone. So that's why it's very vital that you can mill enough to get to that certain quantity. And there are certain grade 1s, like Ripple Banshee that we do play, that can be even called in the early game to help take advantage, also like build up some advantage that way. And because we are milling, and because we need ways to revive Skull Dragons or Ghost Ships during our main phase, Negrabone becomes that important even more so. So we have at least 2 copies to be able to revive 2 Skull Dragons, or we at least build up towards it, and then we can build a solid column still with a booster and a Skull Dragon or a Ghost Ship on the other one too. So it's really what you have available, but Negrabone just makes it that a lot easier to be able to like call anything that we need. It's also a card that goes into the deck, so it helps increase deck size in that point because you are milling. But when you're milling, you also want to have really solid targets, and this is where Dancing Cutlass comes into play too. So Dancing Cutlass is essentially another drop zone skill type of card, and when you combine another copy from the drop zone and discard the top card of your deck, you can call this to rearguard circle and countercharge 1. So 2 things. This is our countercharge engine, so that way we can refund our counterblast, so we can actually stay low damage. And during our main phase, we just get our resources back, so that way during the battle phase, we can use Nightrose. Or if you need to use a counterblast during the main phase because of a Columbard, for example, you're easily able to do that too. And if you get counterblast denied in a way, you can still get around that. So you can do that. Furthermore, you may have noticed that I'm not playing Jesse the Ghosty, and so the main difference is that you can have this as a booster set up as a free +1 onto rearguard circle, where Jesse has to attack to countercharge. You would rather have a Skull Dragon or a Ghost Ship attack in place of Jesse anyway at that point, so you can maximize on the number of attacks that you have with big beaters in general. Another cool thing about Dancing Cutlass is that when you do the 4 Skull Dragon attack turn, your Vanguard is generally the weakest attack. So they may have like a 2-pass or something like that and use less cards, but you want to like make your Vanguard threatening still. So this becomes an 11k booster thanks to Nightrose's power-up skills. So then Nightrose can become a column of 23 or 33 once they're at grade 3 or greater. So it actually makes some scary numbers where they have to drop a certain amount of cards for the Vanguard attack, and you have a high amount of crits, so they're going to want to guard it on, or at least if they take it, then they have to pray that you don't crit them, because you can still win by that. Otherwise, you would just distribute your crits onto the Skull Dragons anyway at that point. So having 4 copies of Dancing Cutlass is super helpful. This will come up more than likely on your turn 3 and above, but if for whatever reason the early game dictates that, you can call it. If you have it in the drop zone with another copy, it can happen. It just really depends on what you're milling at that point too. And another grade 1 that we utilize, like I mentioned already, is Ripple Banshee. So it's another card that benefits from being in the drop zone, because when it's called from the drop zone, you can Soul Blast 1, draw a card, and then give this unit 4k until the end of the turn. This becomes a 12k attacker or a booster, And then, of course, with Nightrose makes it a 17k that you can just be flexible with. If you put this behind a ghost ship, this makes 17 plus 29, which is like 46 or something like that. It's a very big column too. So if you don't really have the Skull Dragons to fill out with that, you can still rely on cards like Ripple Banshee to make solid columns with your other rearguards that can attack. Also, during your turn 1 and 2, if you have this card with Negrabone too, it might be valuable to use it right away because you'll get to refund the card that you discard from Negrabone, but then you get a free rearguard onto Rearguard Trickle. And it could be fodder for Skeleton Sea Navigator for the following turn. If you can mill it, or if you have enough rear guards, you can mill again to just really take advantage of that too as well. There are also power plays that you can do where you can draw more cards, such as during the battle phase too. So this can draw a card during the main phase and then revive it back with Nightrose and also draw again. You can use and tie them with Ghost Ship, so you can really maximize on drawing cards at that point too. So there's some flexibility too as well. Onto the remaining grade 0/triggers. We are playing our starter. Grenache is the best starter. Look at that art, it's phenomenal. We are playing 4, 8, 11 crit / 1 draw PG. So again, we want to be very aggro with this, so that's why we're playing so many crit, but also just taking advantage of the 30k Sentinel. Again, once you're past your turn 3, you can't use grade 3 heal. So if you're trying to grab something with Greed Shade, for example, your 30k Sentinel is a great grab at that point too. Plus we mill, you know, it's not as bad as we mill triggers. At this point you can reuse them in a way with Greed Shade, so that's always appreciated. And we do play 1 draw PG just in case we need another like perfect guard type of deal. There are times where you're able to ride Nightrose and get a protect marker, which is our PG essentially, but if we're not consistently riding, then we don't have any PGs at that point, and we're relying with 1 card shields, and so having the draw PG could help. You could also get it back from Greed Shade's ability too on top of that too, so you have 1 or 2 PGs that you can work with. Or if you're consistently riding and you're just using like 30k Sentinels, you start stacking up PGs in your hand too for later use at that point too. So it's very flexible in that sense too. So I'm gonna show off a ride progression and also some key plays that you can kind of get the gist of it. Let's say this is our starting hand. Ideally we want to have like Skeleton Sea Navigator and then another grade 1 to ride with, and then some kind of body, whether it be a trigger or maybe a grade 1. Ideally a grade 1 at that point, but if we can't see it in our turn 1, we could always get to our turn 2. And if you have the grade 3 Vanguard like Nightrose, that's a great appreciative, but it's not like the end of the world if you don't see it. We have cards like Reach Shade and so on to be able to get it. And we draw for turn. Let's say we're going first, and in this case I didn't draw another grade 1, so I'm gonna have to ride Negrabone. We draw another card for our starter, we get another Reach Shade. So this is what you can do. You can call the 2 cards, rest them with Navigator, and then we're gonna mill 5 cards. So I'm gonna try to see it. Wow, 2 Cutlass already and 2 triggers, 3 triggers. So this is our mill. It's not horrible, but it's not great at the same time. And so let me see if I can move this a little bit. There you go. So you can kind of see the drop zone as we go about. Since it's our first turn, we just pass turn, we take a damage. Let's say it's a Columbard. Oh man, they really hit us. Stand and draw at that point. So we drew, oh, our Nightrose. Okay, so this works. So this is an ideal time to actually ride into Ruin Shade. If not, you can use Columbard. This is our field setup so far. You can mill first because we do have a Greed Shade, so we kind of are curious what we can mill. And so here's 2, 3, 4, and 5. Look at that. Okay, Ripple Banshee, Ghost Ship, a Negrabone, and another Cutlass. So we're having a variety of cards now. So we have our grade 2 beater that we can use. We have 10 cards in the drop zone, so we could even use Negrabone immediately if you want to. I'm going to call Greed Shade, and then with Greed Shade I'm going to discard another Greed Shade to mill 2 and then grab something. So ooh, we got another Negrabone. So in this case we can grab a grade 3 heal just to use it defensively if you want to while we have the rest of the cards, but it really doesn't matter because we're going to use the Negrabone, discard this that we grabbed because we have another one in our drop zone anyway, and we want to keep the Nightrose in our hand too. So because we have 10 or more cards, we can revive a bunch of options now. So we can do either Ghost Ship or Ripple Banshee. So if you want a body to stay, you can call Ripple Banshee, and then also you will Soul Blast so you can get the Negrabone out for the following turn. That might be the best play. Otherwise, if you want to have like more of like a beater, you can use Ghost Ship too. So it's actually, you know, you can go either way. In this case, I'm going to go with Ripple Banshee just to have the body still, but also be able to Soul Blast the Negrabone. So we have 2 in our drop zone and we draw a card. and we still have his hand. And we can draw into pieces that we're still not like having yet, so we just got a Beatrice, so this is going to be super helpful. So with the powers, so you can make a column if you want to, or you can just have a 3 attack turn. You can attack with, which one's the weakest actually? So we have 10 or more, so Greed Shade is +5, and Ripple Banshee is +4, so this is actually the weakest. Attack for 14, and then you can poke again with Regard if you want to be safe, and then Ruin Shade skill can mill 2 more cards, and oh, Column Bar, sweet. We can use that for next turn if we need to. And then the drive check will be a Skull Dragon. Look at that. We're seeing Skull Dragon already. So it may not be the best that it's in our hand. But we are seeing the pieces, as you can see. And so their following turn, let's say they want to maybe kill off our Regards or something. So they attack this. And because they already know that we have 1 Counterblast and we have a Column Bard, let's say they just attack our other Regard as well, just to keep us at 1. So I'm going to stand, draw. So this is our hand so far. Okay, so a couple options. We have Beatrice. We have, we're going to have 2 cards in the soul. And so we have a Negrabone here, another Negrabone. We have Ripple Banshee and Ghost Ship, and we have a Column Bard to work with. We have also Cutlasses that we can use. So there's a couple ways that we can do things. So we can use Column Bard to also fetch for the other Skull Dragon, and then the Beatrice that we have in hand still can be used during the battle phase to get it. So I'm gonna do that. We also have Skeleton Seas Navigator still active. So there's a couple options we can do. So first let's ride to Nightrose, and we have our Protect 1 marker. So this is our hand. I'm gonna use Navigator to mill 2 or mill 5. So look at that. There's a Skull Dragon and another Negrabone. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Perfect. That changes things actually a little bit easier. So let's see. So I've decided to do a certain play. We could use the Column Bard if we wanted to, but without making the video too long, I'm going to focus on just reviving the Skull Dragons during the main phase, and then also have a booster for the Vanguard, so you can kind of see that as well. So I'm going to discard Skull Dragon because of Negrabone in the drop zone. And so this will be bottom deck. And then we can revive it immediately if we want to. And then we have another Negrabone. So I'm going to discard the Beatrice because we need 1 still in the drop zone. And then that can revive another Skull Dragon. And we technically have another Negrabone if you want to. So you could use it and take advantage of the Counterblast. So, and then the next thing that we can do, let's say if we use the damage for Counterblasting, but we didn't. So I'm going to use this to bind 1 and then mill another card. We're milling another Ripple Banshee and then revive it behind the Vanguard now. So this is our hand still. So it's not horrible, but we're at 1 damage too, so we're not scared. So with that being said, we have 5, 10, 15, 18 cards in drop zone already. So 18 times 2 is 36. So 36 plus 12 is 48. 48 plus the 5 from Nightrose will be 53. So now we're already swinging for 53. This will kill itself. Then this will add to another 2k. So this is 55 going into the drop zone. And then you can have Nightrose attack boosted and use the skill to counterblast 1. And again, since we only have 1 CB, you want to take advantage of Beatrice. Where is she? There's Beatrice. Oh, put it behind her, put it here. And then you want to call it out on this Regard, so you might as well get another Regard into the drop zone to make the numbers still. And then Soul Blast, Ruin Shade, for example. And call the other Skull Dragon. So now we have this. Remember, this is 12 plus 11, so this makes 23. And then for a twin drive, no triggers, unfortunately. And then this will be plus 50 something, and this will be 50 plus something. These die. This also dies. Don't forget the booster, so that's another 2k that you want to take advantage of. And just like that, we did 5 attacks on the first grade 3 turn with Skull Dragons over 50k. So if you do open up with Navigator, you can really take advantage of that. If you use Column Bard, for example, in the early game, you can grab Skeleton Seas Navigator as well. You can grab other pieces that you need, like Skull Dragon, Negrabone, and so on, to superior call stuff that you need for later on. Super helpful. So the consistency is there too as well, but I just want to give you an idea. And then of course, obviously, if they're not dead, they're going to give you some damage because the only thing they can attack is Vanguard. So if you go all the way to like 4 damage, ride, and then stand, then you have cards like a Negerbone still. You have a Columbard, you have Skull Dragon, so you can use Negerbone to revive. You can even have cards in your hand to help you revive cards. So you have another Beatrice, you'll ride Nightrose to have another card in Soul, Protect Marker, revive your Skull Dragon, use Negerbone to get another Skull Dragon, and then do the same thing again. Just bigger, it just scales. So I just wanted to show that. So I hope that was helpful with the ride progression and the plays too. And obviously you could tweak it to your preference at that point too. So this is where I talk about more of the other cards that people usually play and some suggestions too. So like I mentioned, cards like Jessie the Ghosty is another way to countercharge. But the problem with this card is that you're wasting an attack from Jessie rather than being a Ghost Ship or a Skull Dragon. And again, this deck wants to be aggressive too. So that's why we play Cutlass instead of the Jessie. And then as you notice with the booster for the Vanguard, it makes the Vanguard attack even better too. Also, in one of my prior videos, I showed like a play with Cutlass where if you only had one card left in hand, let's say you use up your hand on defending yourself, then you draw your card. If you have Dancing Cutlass, a Columbard, and a Negerbone in drop, you can basically build a field of 3 cards. Because you can revive Columbard, revive your Skull Dragon, your Cutlass can come back to boost the Columbard and make counter charge as well, so it refunds the Columbard, and then you can still do a 3 Skull Dragon attack turn if you have the Soul for Beatrice in that sense too. So Cutlass can help with that field setup too, and also still counter charge while Jessie has to attack. And then also if you want to revive it with its own skill, you have to kill off 2 of your rear guards, which you would rather have for Navigator at that point too. So in the grade 1s, you're probably asking like, why not see Strolling Banshee instead of some of the other cards? I think as you saw that just having cards in the drop zone to do something as you're milling heavy is very important in this deck, especially since you're committing to a Navigator type of card choice. Sea Strolling Banshee is like the middle ground essentially. So like you would like, ideally if you ride this, you can search anything you want, which is great. But if you don't ride it, then later on you can at least have a booster where it can discard the top 2 cards of your deck, and then if it was a trigger, you can retire and draw this card. So you can mill combo pieces, and that's great, which is what you want. But if you're on a Nightrose hand, it gets retired, so you miss out on the draw power. If you mill a trigger and a unit, this retires itself and draw a card, so it's a best of both worlds in that scenario too. So it's another grade 1 that you have to account for too, but there is room, so it's just like where you want to go with that direction. And then the next card, probably asking, is Tommy the Ghosty Brothers. So the thing with this card, like I like it in the sense of like you can check the top 5 for any grade 3, so you can get your pieces, discard immediately like Skull Dragon for example, or you can get grade 3 heals if you're going second to survive. So that's another way to do that. The problem with this card is that if you miss, it's all for nothing. And yes, it's another body that you can rest with Navigator technically, but it doesn't really do much. It's a 13k booster, but then you have Rebel Banshee that can also become a 12k booster, which is like not that much different. But most of the time you're going to do Skull Dragons anyway for those boosting powers. The only benefit would be like if this was behind the Vanguard to make that Nightrose column a lot bigger. But again, we can like preserve our resources and take advantage of a Cutlass to be able to do that job for us. And then if we revive more Cutlasses, we can be flexible in that sense too. So that's why I would rather focus on milling heavily and then use the other cards in the drop zone to really do stuff, and also keep digging for pieces if I need to use Columbard or Greedshade to continue on. And I know there's other cards like Negrolazy, the Ghosty, you got Mick the Ghosty, and all these other promos and stuff that you can do. I think if you're playing a different type of build where it's not as fast, I think that's fine because you just want to be flexible in your choices on what to call. This deck wants to go fast and hit hard and take abuse of Skull Dragons, obviously. So we're just going to optimize the deck to really do that one thing. It may brick and lose to certain matchups, and that's okay, but that's the trade-off that we have with this deck build too. So other than that, this is a build I feel like with the aggression can still perform at an event. But it's not necessarily the best deck in the format, but like we like Nightrose, so that's why we're here watching this video, right? And I just want to give an update on Nightrose as well too, because it's one of my favorite clans and also decks in granblue. And if you like the video, let me know that you like it, maybe some ideas. I like to engage with the community too. I'm always open-minded too, and maybe some like suggestions that I can give if people have other more specific questions too. Happy to help out where I can. And if you want to support the channel, use the affiliated links like 50 Card Shop, Trading Carmen, TCG Player. You could also book a one-on-one session with me on METAFY if you want to increase your skill level, and then also if you want to take advantage of how to win Cardfight tournaments book on the Amazon website as well. So the links are below as well. So on to the next one, amigos. Bye!